Thank you for coming, every one of you. It's been a long day. Most of you know that. You've experienced it along with the rest of us. And you know how sometimes you just barely miss on something. It was there, and it looked like it was going to be a great opportunity, and it just misses, and you kind of like that tonight when we came out of the parking lot and headed this way. Betty said it'd be nice if this was one of those singing nights, wouldn't it? You know, because you've spoken so much. And I said, well, yeah, but I'm ready. And we came in, and Jed said, we were planning a singing service tonight. You weren't planning to preach, were you? And I said, well, yeah, I was planning to, but I wouldn't be offended. And then we discovered he was a week ahead. Next Sunday's the 5th Sunday, and so I mean, he it's not like he gets ahead very often, but he was, and so there, you know, I just right there, it almost happened, and then I came and sat down here, and Chris sat behind me, and Chris never said this before, but he said, "Would you like me to preach tonight?" There it was again. And I said, well, yeah, if you'd like to. He said, well, give me your outline. So you guys remember what I said this morning I was going to preach on this evening, right? I mean, there won't be a test, but hopefully you remember I said I was going to talk about Velcro Religion. And so I just slipped him this page. Along the way, I thought this week that it'd be smart to get a little background on Velcro. And I you know, it's been sticking around for a while, but I didn't know much about it. It says here that it's invented by a guy named George Mentrial, I believe is the way it would be pronounced. Two different resources had different information. It's kind of like the science of the day. Somebody said in the 1940s, and somebody else said in the 1950s, after being plagued by cockleburrs in the battlefield in some foreign country, he saw how those things stuck and you couldn't get them off your pants and your cuffs and all that kind of stuff. And finally, being a smart man, he said, you know, if you get something else to stick like that for belt waistbands, and I don't know what all that may be used for now. And so he developed the hooks and loops means of sticking things together and keeping them together. It's been marketed primarily since the 1970s, but it is designed to be a latch that will not let go. So that's, I don't know why he could make a sermon out of that. You guys, I mean, they give him that much. And he looked it over and said, I think you better do this. And so here I am again. Still, I'm going to be the speaker tonight. And maybe it all got kicked off with a call came about 5:30 and this afternoon, and I was already putting on my tie or whatever away from my phone that was beside Betty, and ringing in there. She said, your phone's ringing. I said, well, I can't get back to it. Just answer it. And she said, it's Joe Metters. Joe's a Baptist deacon friend back in Florence, Alabama. Go ahead and talk to him. Only thing I forgot was that I had on my Bluetooth and hearing aids, and so when Joe said hello, it came into my head instead of at the phone, and so I had to go join the phone, get with him. He said, two or three things, and I said, well, really, right now we're busy. We're getting ready to go back to church. Had a pretty full day. We're going back. He said, you're going back? Is you going to preach again? I said, yeah, I'm expected to. He said, well, I'm going to tell you what, there must be a lot of them saying amen to get you to preach again tonight. I said, not so much. Yeah. So I may need to get a Baptist crowd in here and see what happens with that. But it'd probably be about the same thing. So anyway, if you weren't here this morning, I wasn't that much fun, but we looked at Psalms 26 and proposed to do that again tonight. not because we didn't get it right the first time, but on the thesis that very, very often you'll read a passage and you'll say, I read that 100 times. I never saw it that way before. I never got that from it before. And kind of in the back of our head, we tend to say, I guess it's always been there, but I just never saw it that way. And we wonder why. My explanation, I hope that I'm right in saying so, is that the last time we read it, and maybe all the other times that we read the same thing, we were not at a spiritual level yet to grasp the message that we're getting now. And if we live another 10 years and continue to study and grow, it might be we read that same passage again and say, whoop, there's another level on this. I hadn't seen this before. And what happened to me a while back was I looked at Psalms 26 and I was fascinated. It gets lost in there with 23, and 22, why hast thou forsaken me, and the Lord being my shepherd, and 23, and I'm not going to ask you, but who's read 26 in a long time? I got fascinated by it, obviously, because I designed a lesson from it, the one tonight. And then things happened and I didn't get around to preaching it. I told me, I'm usually, this isn't bragging, it's just so you understand what's going on. I typically am 6 weeks to 2 months ahead with my plans for sermons. It's just always been, I don't want ever, I see preachers get so very, very frustrated with, it's Saturday night and they don't have a sermon yet, or sometimes it's Sunday morning, they don't have one yet. And one guy, I'll divert here just a little bit to share this with you, what can happen to preachers. This guy told me that one Sunday he was supposed to drive over from Florence, Alabama, over into Tennessee. It happened to be the city where Jim Beam is brewed, but he wasn't supposed to be going there. But they were meeting at like 10:30 or something, so he didn't have to get up and leave too early. And he decided, I'm going to preach such and such a sermon. But he got about half the way, too far, to turn around and go back, and he realized, I forgot my outline. Oh, what will I do? What will I do? So all at once it occurred to him, I know what, I preached one just a few weeks ago that I think I remember that just fine. And I've never been over to this place. And so I think I'll preach that when I preached at such and such. So he's happy now. He drove in. He said, right after the Lord's Supper, when there was one more song to be sung, the local preacher leaned over and said, what you going to preach on today? He said, well, I thought I'd do whatever it was. And the guy said, yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I heard you do that at youth meeting recently, and I just preached it here last week. So he said, during the third verse, I had to come up with a sermon. Well, I don't want that to happen to me, so I try to stay out in advance. But the thing that surprised me was that when I sit down in a few weeks, without remembering that I'd done 26 before, I hit 26, and I said, yeah, that's, and I designed what we preached this morning. And then I realized, you got two on the same passage. And I thought, well, maybe that's a good way to illustrate that phenomenon of finding different lessons that you overlooked before. And we just have the interesting experience of teaching, preaching, studying from the same psalm, both Sunday morning and Sunday night, and just see how that can be applied. So this morning, if you were not here, or if you were here, we were covering the idea of being able to stand on level ground, have good footing, and we applied common ground and the realization we all ought to be able to get along, those things from that passage. But tonight, I want to use the Velcro thing, and I'm glad you're back, but that's That's how that developed. Let's read first from Psalm 26. This is, I've typed at my size of font from the English Standard Version, and there's that one. No, I did this one from King James, I believe, and I refer to this. But David is usually attributed as the writer. And he said, "Vindicate me, Lord, for I have walked in integrity. I have also trusted in the Lord. I shall not slip. Examine me, O Lord, and prove me. Try my mind and my heart. For your loving kindness is before my eyes, and I have walked in your truth. I have not sat with idolatrous mortals, nor will I go in with hypocrites. I have hated the assembly of the evildoers, and I do not sit with the wicked. I shall wash my hands in innocent so that I shall go about your altar, O Lord, that I may proclaim with the voice of thanksgiving and tell of all your wonderful works. Lord, I have loved the habitation of your house and the place where your glory sits. Do not gather my soul with sinners, nor my life with bloodthirsty men in whose hands is a sinister scheme and whose right hand is full of bribes. But as for me, I will walk in my integrity. Redeem me and be merciful to me. My foot stands in an even, that's the level place, in the congregation, and I will bless the Lord. And that's the passage. We would pick up from that Velcro idea, of course, whenever he says, "And I shall not slip." He starts out by kind of, you might say, defending himself, recommending himself to God. I don't get the idea that we ought to at all take this to be anything like the situation in Luke chapter 18, isn't it? Where Jesus talked about the Pharisee that went into prayer and basically seems to try to thank God or tell God how fortunate God is to have men like him. You know, I don't sin like these other people do. I give my tithes and I do all these good things and I fast and all and I'm not like that man there who's the one who's fallen upon his face and said, "Be merciful to me, I'm a sinner." I'm not like him either. Do you get the idea? God said, yeah, and that's the problem. You're not humble. You're not understanding that you are a sinner that needs to repent of his sins. You're high and mighty and haughty, and you come in my face trying to tell me that I'm blessed to have you. I don't think that's at all what's happening here, but rather that David, be he the writer, is realizing that I'm not perfect. I do have some handicaps. He may be a little bit confused about being able to sell his case to God based on his own opinion. He's defending himself to a degree, but not so much recommending himself. He feels confident. I've walked in my integrity. I've been a sincere, honest man, is what that amounts to. My religion has been true. It's been genuine. And I've trusted in you, O Lord. And I believe that because I have been and I am, I believe I'm safe. I don't think I'm going to slip away as long as that. I think I've got religion that will hold on like that Velcro. That's going to last. It's going to survive through whatever happens. Now, some people speak of the security of the believer, and some people teach that as, once saved, always saved. That's not at all the concept yet, by any means, on his part. not 1,000 years before Jesus Christ. Don't try to jump that far at all. It's not that, but he does believe if I do the right thing and serve the Lord appropriately, my soul will be safe. And I think that's good for people to have that confidence, as the passage we cited this afternoon from 1 John 5:13, I write these things unto you, my little children, that you may not sin. But if any man, I'm earlier on, that's the chapter 2. Chapter 5, I want you to know, he said, that you have eternal life. I want you to know you're saved. That's what 5:13 talks about. And so David's saying, I feel secure, and I believe that I will not slip. With that confidence, he invites the investigation, the observation of God. And whenever he says, prove me, examine me, O Lord, and prove me, he's saying, test me, check it out. Well, according to what we know from the scriptures, God is conscious of everything we do all the time. And we don't have to say, well, watch this, because God does watch. And he would be aware of the faithfulness that the individual would have. If this is in the sense of a prayer, then it's still part of the faithfulness that he's communicating with God, as we all ought to do. But his confidence is still there, because he said, I invite you to test me, to prove me, and to try my mind and my heart, my soul. Just look at me to see if I really am pure. And later on, he says, I'm not having anything to do with hypocrisy. I'm the real thing. And you got to know, if you look around at religion today and religious people, that real thing stuff is in kind of short supply, isn't it? Where people's religion is sincere and right, where people aren't trying to put anything over on God. They're not trying to hide somewhere, go out on Saturday night and do things they know are inappropriate for a Christian to do, and then go to church on Sunday and act like nothing ever happened. Hey, this is not the scene that he's giving for himself. You check me. My heart is sincere. And then he says, I know you're going to be fair. And God is fair, isn't he? He's more, always more than fair. Because he said, I'm aware of your loving kindness. And that's before my eyes. I stay conscious all the time, Father, about your grace and mercy, your loving kindness. Whenever we focus more on that aspect of God, it tends to cause us to try harder not to hurt him. You know, if you really, really respect your dad, you really feel bad if you ever did anything that disappointed him. And that's the kind of relationship that the loving kindness respect has. Whenever we'd say, I have, Joseph said to Potiphar's wife, how can I commit this sin? How can I do this and sin against God and against myself? How can I offend God? I don't want to go there. Again, this man with the Velcro religion believes that with these little talks with God, so to speak, that he can ensure the ongoing relationship. And he more or less says, I think that's ensured by the consistency. I think he's asking to continue to bless him so that he can be consistent, that he can continue to have stability and enjoy grace and mercy. That's at the forefront of all that he says here. Because he said, I've walked in your truth. I've walked in your truth. I'm following the guidance that you have given. The New Testament speaks to the fact that even though Jesus was the Son of God. We know him as God in the flesh, don't we? In spite of that, Hebrews 5, 8, and 9 said, though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things that he suffered. Jesus was obedient. And the things that he suffered seem to have had a bearing on the refinement and the conditioning for the final event, so far as even Jesus is concerned. And this man walking in truth is basically saying, I'm being obedient. My resource for guidance isn't something else. It's your truth. And he said, I don't mess around with the people I shouldn't mess around with. I've not sat in the council of the idolatrous. One of the biggest problems that God's people had in those days was falling into idolatry. And this business of slipping was a constant problem for them. The book of Hosea charges in many cases and places how those people of the time were just, they'd get close to God. God said, the more bless them, the more they sin. In chapter 11, verse 7, God said, my people are bent on backsliding. I don't know whether it's a good analogy or not. I guess I've got to move to paper clips, but there's been a point at which I'd say that the tendency to backsliding, as he's using here, is kind of like a hairpin. And then Betty's pointed out to me, nobody uses hairpins anymore. And so what does that mean? I don't know. But, a paperclip is designed to be in a certain shape. And given the opportunity, it'll return pretty much to the same shape. You can just bend it way out and all of that. But with normal use, it'll stay pretty much in the same, because it's bent to be that way. The force of it with the tension is bent to keep those papers together. And he said, but my people are just bent, so they tend always to fly back to falling away, backsliding. They have such a habit and such a tendency that he used that expression. And of course, it's easy for us to slip even today unless we stay in that truth and that faithfulness, that pattern. In writing the church in Corinth, you remember Paul urged in chapter 10, I believe, of 1 Corinthians in verse 12, let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. The person who says, I'm all right, I don't meet with the idolaters, and I don't have any business with these guys who are conniving and scheming and taking bribes. I'm not any part of that. And the Lord said, be careful that you don't become overconfident. The warnings that Simon Peter was given, be careful. The disciples were urged by Jesus that take heed lest you fall. The body, he says, is going to be a problem for you. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And there are myriad scriptures in the New Testament that warn or give remedies to restore those who have gone away. 2 Peter chapter 2 talks about how that's worse for them than the beginning. Galatians chapter 6, the first couple of verses, urges that if anyone in our fellowship returns to sin and is overcome therein, he says, you who are spiritual, you who still believe you can identify what David's saying about his Velcro religion, you who think I'm still safe and sound and faithful, true, you assume the responsibility to restore such a one, considering yourself that you might also be tempted. That's about as close as the scripture ever comes to saying there, but by the grace of God go I. There It could have happened to us. It could have happened to my son, your son, daughter, friends. We have to not be condemning of others unfairly because it might happen to us. And he said, you help people through those things because they can fall, they can slip back, and they can be lost forever. We want to hang on to the Velcro. Be the hook that goes through the loop to ensure that we do not fall. He said, I hate the meetings, those gatherings of the evildoers. I won't sit with the wicked. I want to wash my hands and have innocence so that when I come into your presence, I'll be somebody who belongs there because I possess that innocence and I can continue to be in your presence. He's asking, vindicate me. Make it all okay. Now, if he didn't know that he had some problems, what would he ask? Why would he ask for vindication? He knows he's human, as we know we are. And he knows that he could slip, and basically he's saying, I don't want to. But if I can just do what I'm asking, if I can just have this character that I'm asking for, then I won't slip. I know that your word and your will and your truth will hold me where I belong. So vindicate me. Help me escape that which might happen. Lord, I just love your habitation. We might say today, I just love going to church. I just love my home congregation. I just love our church family, you might say today, when he says, I love your habitation, the place where your glory sits. God was going to allow Solomon to build the temple in Jerusalem. At this point, there wouldn't have been a temple yet, but the presence of the Lord where he met the people, still it was his will to be in Jerusalem, in that place where people meet with God. The psalmist said, I want to be welcome, I want to belong, I want to be there because it thrills my soul to have that kind of relationship. And we ought to have that appreciation for the Lord's church and our gatherings. Not that we're talking about a physical building. He really couldn't have been yet at that point in time either. It's not the house, but it's what it houses. It's who is here. It's the relationship that we have with each other. And so the examination was such that he said, I want to ensure that I'll fit, that I'll belong there. I don't want to feel I'm out of place when I come together in your presence, Lord, or with your people. In fact, he goes on to say, I want to be clean enough, pure enough, and know that I'm redeemed so that I can shout about your blessings and forgiveness and long suffering. I want to be somebody who has a right to testify about all of that. I don't want to be the person that if I talk about those things, other people will be saying, well, have you seen how he lives? That's not very impressive. You know, have you heard how he talks, what he does, where he goes? I mean, what kind of deal is this? He said, I want to be legitimate. I think that's the word. I want to be legitimate. I want to be real. I want to be sincere. And Lord, help me in this cleansing process so that my sincerity to you, that maybe you know by checking my heart and my soul, will be respected by the people that I need to influence in a proper, positive way. Then that's part of the hanging on. That's part of the faithfulness. It's part of that don't slip. I can do this, he said from the beginning, as long as I'm hanging on to you. My foot, he says, will, as long as I'm hanging on to you, is when my foot will stand in an even place. I'll have that, my feet under me kind of thing that we talked about this morning. And the world won't be able to cause me to feel dizzy and upset. I'll keep my bearings and I'll pursue. Lord, just help me to walk in my integrity. I know what's right. I know what to do. Lord, help me to do it. I think it's a good prayer for us all the time. And to be aware that in spite of the fact that we have what we have felt all along was a Velcro religion that wouldn't slip, that we realize it could happen, and we want to stay close to God, to His Word, and not take any chances. And when we slip at all, we want to grab on tight, and we want to hold on and say, God, cleanse me, cleanse me. I want to be at home in your assembly. That's our lesson. If you're subject to the invitation of the Lord, anyway, we're about to sing a song of encouragement. You can come and ask for the prayers of the church if you feel you need to do so. And we're ready to help you to be baptized also if you've come with the willingness to that and understanding what it implies and what it accomplishes. We'd help you with that too. Come while we stand and sing.